First, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out today. My name is Mitchell Pitkin. This is Allison Post, Matthew Gould, and Michael Cruz. We're going to talk to you about the autonomous vehicle market.
So as your consultants, we are advising that XYZ should enter the developing market of the autonomous vehicles. And through this presentation, we're going to evaluate reasons why they should and how they should approach the market.
So the first thing I want to talk about is we are going to enter this market, and we do recognize how profitable this will be for us. That is not our sole concern. Our sole concern here is really giving people an opportunity to get on the road. People that may not have been able to get behind the vehicle with the traditional automobile model. And with autonomous driving, we're really going to be able to give people a second chance.
So we found this great video put out by Goldman Sachs' Michael Ronan. It highlights the fundamental changes in mobility that autonomous cars will provide. It's going to impact various industries, and it will transform cars into essentially supercomputers because they'll be running solely on computer power, hopefully mitigating human error overall. And more importantly, it will change the sustainability factor of cars, changing the internal combustion to electricity, as I noted earlier, which is important for global warming and the environment overall. And lastly, it's going to provide a change in the business model, which Mitch is going to touch upon further.
So when we traditionally think about the automotive industry, think of GM, Ford, and other subsidiaries. Well, that's not the case anymore. Now there's Google, Apple, and Tesla. Traditionally, technology companies that are really entering this market, and what I like to think of it as is almost a fintech, where we see technology pairing with financial services and making a whole new industry, and that's what we're facing today, and that's another reason why we want XYZ to be a part of this very profitable change. But there are three key benefits that we wanted to highlight that go along with this: convenience, safety, and new and improved mobility. I'm going to hit upon convenience in the following slide, but I want to talk about safety. And I want to pose a question to all of you. Do you trust technology? That's really what we're facing here. Let me ask you some of these. Did the car have a bad day at work? Did your boss yell at the car? Did you have, simple things like that that really could potentially lead to, maybe sun glare, things like that that could distract you while you're driving. The car is not checking its phone. The car is not tuning the radio. The car might not be fiddling in the back seat with a toddler squirming around. It's really taking out a lot of human errors that we may potentially face in the vehicle. So, as you see here, we see an immense increase in the population, roughly 2.4 billion by 2050. What does this mean? It means overall congestion within our cities. But what can autonomous driving do to help this and make it something that we can address effectively? Well, as Ellie hit upon earlier, these are not just autonomous cars. These are supercomputers. And now, with technology, we're able to potentially pair this with our infrastructure and have traffic flow like never before. It's no more stop and go. Vehicles have the potential to travel unanimously and in unison together. And I think through this, that's another reason why we want to enter this market. Improve technology overall, improve our quality of life.
And this leads us to our multi-billion-dollar question. Whether or not we're going to program these autonomous vehicles to preserve the lives of the people within the car or the safety of those outside of the car. And this really is a tough issue, but we believe, upon careful consideration, that the most appropriate response to this would be to promote the safety of people within the car. Now, we came to this decision based on a couple of ethical frameworks. First of which would be the rights framework. Everyone has basic human rights: right to safety, natural law, etc. Now, these rights are violated or infringed upon, for lack of a better phrase, when you step into a car driven by a human. As mentioned, there is a significant amount of human error that can occur, and there are unfortunate and tragic incidences on a daily. There is no way to potentially mitigate the human error within the vehicle. Now, when people are also buying vehicles, they value safety. And you don't have to take my word for it. We do have some statistics to back that up. In 2016, Kelley Blue Book listed the top 10 selling automobiles, 3 of which were pickup trucks. We excluded those from our data. However, of the 7 remaining cars, 6 of them earned top safety picks by the IIHS or top safety pick pluses. And this just goes to show that people do value safety. Now, fuel efficiency, color, style, it's all important, but people are willing to spend money when they feel safe. And by feeling safe, they're going to be more likely to drive defensively, they're going to feel better about the people within the car, they're going to have a greater outlook on their traveling experience. Now, if we can make these autonomous vehicles preserve the individual rights to safety, that does maximize utility. And now utility, in its most basic essence, is maximizing goods and minimizing harms. Now, for some more numbers, according to US News Reports in 2015, which were the most complete automotive records we had available to us, in those 2015 reports, there were 8 incidences where there were autonomous vehicle crashes, one of which resulted in a tragic death. Now, it should be noted that of those 8 incidences, the automotive vehicle or the automotive company that produced that car was not charged criminally with any negligence or things of that nature. Which just goes to show there is potential. There is potential, and it is a small sample size, admittedly, but 8 crashes is a smaller number of crashes than there are states in the United States. For an entire year, that is crazy. But if you compare that to 6.3 million crashes in 2015 in the US alone, that resulted in over 35,000 deaths, I mean, there is a huge potential here. We are able to save hundreds, if not thousands, of lives on a yearly basis. And that would maximize utility for the betterment of society. If you have fewer people dying, having to spend their hard-earned paychecks on automobile repairs, it's going to allow people to focus on other aspects of their life and take just a common worry that just is so commonplace that it just seems to be part of society. But we can get rid of this. It promotes defensive driving if we have these vehicles trying to preserve itself, which eliminates risky maneuvers, which if you're running late to a meeting, you're in a rush to get somewhere, like you no longer have those keys in your control. Like the car will take care of that for you, and it will provide safety for everyone. Now this everybody, this in essence refers to the common good. Now, there are an exponential amount of people that can benefit from this. Not just people that currently drive, but people that currently cannot drive. Specifically the elderly and people with disabilities such as veterans. Now, for the elderly, these people are people who once were able to drive and now no longer can due to eyesight, due to fatigue, due to a variety of reasons. Maybe it's a physical thing. We are giving them mobility back. We are no longer making them dependent on their children, on caretakers, once again saving money, saving time, and saving a bit of their dignity. Now, people with disabilities could also benefit from this greatly, and an example I'd like to provide is an example of a veteran. Say there was a man or woman who served a couple tours in Iraq or Afghanistan, and unfortunately, in the line of duty, lost a leg, lost a foot, or something of that nature in a car bomb. Absolutely tragic. But when they come back to the US, when they come back to their domestic life, their world is unbelievably altered. And that is because they don't have the same abilities and the same freedoms that they did when they left to try to ensure all of our freedoms who are living here. This is especially important and touches upon the justice framework, or the justice for all, based on the fact that since they were willing to sacrifice and provide so much for people domestically, why then, if we have the ability to improve their lives in a considerable way, would we not take that opportunity and seize it?
So then Matt, you might ask the question, why not children if you're going to let these elderly and disabled people drive or drive autonomous vehicles, why would you let children who can't drive now?
Yeah, that's a good question. There is a potential where anyone could sit behind the wheel and get chauffeured or taxied around, but we center our belief that we should limit the market to exclude children for a couple of reasons. First of which, there's a mental maturity aspect that comes into play. We hope someday we can create complete, almost like a complete taxi service where the computer will take care of everything, but for now, we do value choice of people, and therefore we hope to have a override capacity. Now, if a child isn't mentally mature enough to drive a normal car, we wouldn't want them to be put in an unfortunate predicament where they're forced to make a very quick decision that could have life-changing, life-altering impacts, not just to them, but to the people around them. And we don't want that on their shoulders. Another reason, just like anything else in life, there are thresholds. When you're voting, you don't see 12-year-olds voting. Whether it's fair or not, whether you think a 17-year-old could vote, that doesn't matter. The set age is 18. Same thing when you don't let 13-year-olds walk into a convenience store and buy cigarettes. It's just something you don't do in the U.S. because we believe that there are certain tiers of maturity and levels that you need to reach before you're able to touch upon that. But what I want you to take away from this utility and the common good is that we're not just providing vehicles here. We're not providing new technology, new ways to think and act in your daily life. We're selling people a second chance at life and a second chance at their freedom.
So why XYZ should enter this new market for autonomous vehicles? As Matt touched upon in his previous slide, we're really seeing a dynamic change within the model, and now we're almost seeing a ride-sharing-esque dynamic to this. For example, I may go to work in the morning with my father, and we may be able to now send our autonomous vehicle back to our house for my mom to use, maybe for my sister to use. It's really changing the way that we think and consume vehicles. But most importantly, for now, as Matt touched upon earlier, we're giving individuals the right to choose, and that's why we believe we should have an override capacity temporarily within our vehicles. Because not everyone is going to want to be a part of this change, yet we think it's crucial for now so they have that access. But hopefully in the future, through R&D, we can phase this out and be able to use our technology to its full capacity to maximize safety.
Now I'm going to go into associated risks. So we're going to touch upon three main risks: regulation risk, business risk, and CSR. First off, with regulation risk, I'd like to touch upon the Tesla program that recently took place. As you may know, an individual passed away because of a vehicle collision involved with Tesla. Well, after the 6-month probe, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration cleared Tesla of any wrongdoing. And Tesla is improving every day, annually, to increase their technology. On top of this, the Obama administration actually endorsed self-autonomous cars because they see the value it brings to elderly and disabled, as well as the efficiency it provides. And according to USA Today, 60 bills were imposed in 20 different states that work hand in hand with autonomous cars because they see the value in it and they want to keep it regulated. If we go into business risk, the biggest risk XYZ faces is not entering this market. According to Infor.com, a business software company, they say the biggest risk companies take, specifically in the auto industry, is not being ahead on trends. They miss out. For example, if you look at the 1970 oil crisis, big American muscle cars lost in on the market because efficient companies from overseas came in with more efficient cars and took over at least 3% of that market. Lastly, if you go into CSR, many of these companies take into account their opportunity they have to provide communities. Ford, GM, they want to go beyond the community. And by providing self-autonomous cars, they do a justice for their people in the community where people have opportunities that they've never had before. And such community service is an emphasis of the CSR. Lastly, Catholic social teaching. I want to touch upon three main points. Human dignity of the person, providing opportunity, community improvement, and talents exploited. Giving these people opportunities they've never had is an emphasis of human dignity. The ability to improve technology brings community closer together. And lastly, the talents that these companies have to provide these people that they've never had, they're fully utilizing their intellectual ability to give people an opportunity they've never had.
So conclusion, we'd like to emphasize the fact that we believe XYZ should enter the developing autonomous vehicle market. It's going to transform the way we live overall through multiple channels of society, and most importantly, give the elderly and the disabled a second chance, which is crucial to their lives. So now we'd like to open up the floor to any questions you guys may have for us.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, take me back to the CSR risk. Just run me through that argument that you were making here.
So companies have their corporate social responsibility, and you look specifically at the auto industry, if you look at GM and Ford, what they like to touch upon is, a big part of it is eco-friendly environment. That's a big push in that industry. But also, they touch upon how they want to go beyond the vehicle. They want to provide to the community. They want to intercorrelate their services to benefit people's lives in general. And we think that this product can provide exactly that and emphasize their CSR.
Okay, great, thank you.
Let me try to bring together, if I can, the ethics aspects. So utilitarianism, you think it's a no-brainer because of the safety issue, and the safety issue also addresses the right to safety, which is a basic human right, you would think. Catholic social thought, human dignity, community, improve talents, exploit community. You mentioned justice, although in passing. Could you say more about justice, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So justice essentially means giving equal, like portions of whatever the good is. It is what you're like. It's essentially a branch of fairness or related to fairness, and it's what people deserve. It's what people deserve. And the avenue that we were talking about justice in was specifically the disabled, where they are still human beings. They still deserve to be able to be transported, like, on their own, and especially for the veteran example. It's only fair and it's only just that since they fought so hard overseas, assumed so much personal risk, that they be rewarded with like benefits. And the like benefit in this case would be the ability to travel, the ability to lead a at least semi-normal life.
So you had mentioned briefly the override capability. It seemed like you were going from an approach where it was more on just wanting to trust technology and the safety of it. But within the stance that you're taking of, of Catholic social teaching with disabled, what would you do in a position where you have the override capability for safety, but they have physical limitations where they can't use it?
Absolutely. That's a great point. Like we hinted upon earlier in our presentation, is that it's not so much for people that are disabled. We hope that people that are disabled are accessing this vehicle because it is autonomous, not for the override capacity. The override capacity is for now people that maybe don't want to be a part of this trend of having something else drive their car. So that's why we're, through Catholic Social Teaching, is that business is a vocation that benefits all. So that's why we feel we're really reaching everyone available. So, maybe I still want to drive my car even if it is autonomous, but maybe some days I want to be able to sit back and relax and let the car do the work.
Are you not worried about the insurance and liability challenges? So I'm not quite clear on where you come down on that, and it's related to this point we were just discussing. Which
Absolutely.
is, when do you have to have override and don't you do it?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on
So, going back to your point of the insurance risk, so we understand that with this overall change, we're essentially formatting a new industry, and with the new industry becomes a new dynamic to the affected industries around it. So as Ali talked about earlier, there is going to be a change with parking industry, real estate, insurance, and finance. So the way we overall understand how we produce these cars, what do we insure now to mitigate risk, is changing. Now, I can't provide an exact exactly react to this change, but what we discussed is some way, general consensus that the way it should be is in buying this vehicle is almost essentially giving consent to the fact that I'm trusting this technology. It is not at fault for any accidents, as almost a concession to the fact that this is what I'm going to be a part of now,
So you buy the vehicle, you sign a waiver.
essentially, yes.
Can I follow up on that? Normally, there's a notion of informed consent. Now, admittedly, a lot of people sign their, something flashes, oh, do you consent, click the button. But how do you, in this case, where it's going to be really remarkably complicated from a technical standpoint, how do you explain this to people in a way that they will understand, so that they can have informed consent to the type of waiver you're talking about?
I believe that the best way to approach this, when we look at it from the grand scheme of things, liability, risk, insurance, that is decreased so substantially because of this technology. And if you think about the type of funding that goes into these cars and the funding that goes into insurance, if you could decrease that, as Matt said on the statistics, if it's that infinitesimal compared to what human error is, then there's going to be the proper insurance liability for those types of cars. And as you say, there are risks, but when it's that much of a decrease, I think there's enough proper financial support to take care of those minor risks that you face when you have this type of technology.
But who's bearing the liability?
Right now, there was an article by Wall Street Journal where they discussed the GM and Uber and Google trying to get into these markets. And right now, they have to take the liability because of the car is doing the work for the human. So they have to take on the risk, and they put it on them because hands are off the wheel. So these companies have to take on risk. That's why there's so much legislation. That's why they are obligated to report any deficiencies in their technology, because of the fact that they become liable in certain instances where the car is at fault. And that's why they're actually prohibiting certain technology companies like Uber, Google, because they want a company that produces their own car, so they take on all of the risks, so they can point the direction at them, and it's easier to regulate from that perspective.
I just kind of want to build on Mike's point just a little bit. I mean, even today when we get in the car, we can see, our safety to an extent. We know the risks that we face every time we get on the road.
And as far as, to touch upon your point, as far as explaining to the average person that might not read the waiver, I mean, we couldn't stress enough that although this technology can be life-changing in a very great way, there are risks, and we do hope to be able to provide legal verbiage in a way that everyone can understand, a way that's not so complex and convoluted that people look at a 60-page document and skip right to the bottom. We want them to understand the technology, not necessarily how it works, but understand the potential benefits, but definitely understand the fallbacks as well.
So, when Mike was, as said, or maybe it was Mitchell, you buy the vehicle, you sign a waiver. You guys, so that's gonna, that applies to a situation where the person's in the car, or the owner of the car, is seemingly responsible for some harm, right? So you're, if a passenger in the car, they can sue you, and, and so can somebody outside the car. You guys made this interesting distinction between the safety, or between the circumstances of those in the car versus outside the car. Can we roll back to that? I wanted to push a little bit more on what you had in mind when you were drawing that distinction. Is that it?
It was, I believe, this is the one where you were talking about, or where we mentioned that we hope to have self-preservation be the
Oh, right.
focus.
Right, it was self-preservation versus society, or somehow we
Yep.
drew a distinction.
Okay, so the way we see this work or unfolding is by self-preservation, we are essentially allowing the technology to do the defensive driving. By preserving the people in the car, not only are the people in the car safe, more likely to, or be more apt to want to drive the car, but it also has an implicit avoidance to other risks. Like, you're not going to crash into a different car because obviously you don't want the people inside of your car to be hurt. So it's, essentially we're going to try to minimize as many collisions, as many incidents as possible based on this defensive driving technology that is going to be underwritten within the programming of the car itself.
What other choice is there?
There's another choice where you can, the other choice provided within the outline of, I guess the outline for lack of a better word, the other choice was provide safety to those outside the car. So the classic ethical decision, if you're on a track and you're going to run over one person, or you can jump off a bridge. Ideally, we're going to eliminate that altogether. We're going to have the car brake before it hits the person or before it jumps off the bridge.
And that goes back to the risk, but self-preservation, that's essentially going to mitigate risk overall within being in the vehicle. And even now, we have technology such as forward warning braking systems in vehicles, which is something that will be essentially on steroids within our vehicles.
We have time for one more quick question if you have one.
Yes, like with the utilitarian approach, is this, and you mentioned the self-preservation, coding from the vehicle. You mentioned earlier that if you send the car back, is that, like, so the car goes back to your house with no one else there? Is that like a capability that over time we maybe want to turn off the self-preservation because there's no one in the car in that aspect?
Absolutely. I think, like we said, going down the road, there's going to be so much varying technology within our vehicles that it's more so not going to be reliant on ourselves, but on the computer